And we've had a series of meetings in Saudi Arabia. We've also seen Trump's representative apparently kept waiting 8 hours to see Vladimir Putin. I'm sure he was on the phone to his boss and would be asking permission just to walk out. Obviously, that wasn't given. He was, I don't know, standing about, but waiting for 8 hours before ushered in to the glorious presence. So it's clear that Vladimir Putin is playing a very neat game of poker. How much he's got in his hand, that's a different question, but he's clearly playing it very well. He's playing it cool. I might want peace, I might not. I can carry on. I'm not going to get, bowled over by offers of joining or the recreation of the G8. I'm not going to break my alliance, with China over this offer from Trump. No, he's playing it very cool, very stony faced, and that's a skillful gameplay. But as I say, how much he's got in his hand, that's a very different matter. It's not automatic that the FSB Putin regime survives. My own take on it is it's a very vulnerable regime. Either way, we've had these negotiations. The initial opening in terms of these negotiations has been pretty predictable. It didn't take a genius to work out that America could knock Zelensky and Ukraine into line. We saw it played out in front of cameras, in terms of the Oval Office. I think it's called the Spray, as they let the press ask questions before formal meetings. The formal meeting didn't happen. Zelensky was simply dismissed. And then Zelensky goes back to Kiev and falls into line. I don't know. We haven't had the rare earth and the rare metals deal, but it seems to be that Ukraine will come up with shed loads of concessions to the United States, will concede whatever the protests are, 20% of its territory. What then happens in terms of domestic politics, that's a different question. But I've argued, even if there was an Azov coup, they would still be faced with the same global realities as Zelensky. So maybe Zelensky gets overthrown in an election. Maybe he gets overthrown from a march, by a march on the capital. Either way, where do you get your planes from? Where do you get your tanks from? Where do you get your financing from? Where do you get your satellite communication from? Where do you get your information from? And the idea that Europe can easily substitute, I've argued, is illusory. I've sort of repeated the figure, but I think it's worthwhile repeating. It sort of surprised me, but didn't surprise me, that if we take all the aid that Europe has given in terms of arms over the last 3 years, which has been a lot. Remember, they always keep emphasizing it on the BBC, more than the United States. Europe has given more than the US. But if we take in euro terms, dollar terms, pound terms, in money terms, what's interesting is that in money terms, only 20% of it originated in Europe. So I'm presuming that the bulk of that is accounted for by F-16s. I'm just making that up. I haven't investigated it. Either way, we've had it illustrated just recently, not what happens to Ukraine, but the power of the United States when it comes to information, i.e. Starlink can be switched off. And of course, the United States did deny satellite information. That means not that they're particularly important, but if you take Storm Shadow, the British missile, the Anglo-Italian French missile that in Britain is called Storm Shadow, to deliver that with super accuracy, it relies on US satellites. If we take drone strikes, if we take missile strikes by Ukraine, it can use GPS, but it's military GPS is US. Anyway, the point is still there that even with a new regime, it faces the same military and strategic realities as the Zelensky regime. So yes, you could imagine the war becoming asymmetrical and some sort of guerrilla struggle taking place. But if you want to maintain a World War One, I'll call it a stalemate for shorthand. If you want to maintain that, you really are reliant at the end of the day on US power, because the US not only has power when it comes to space, it also has power when it comes to Europe as well. Okay, so what is going on with Europe and Ukraine? Again, what I'm saying here is very provisional, very uncertain. Maybe what's going on, and we've heard indications of it from Keir Starmer from France, that in spite of the objections of and what's his name, anyway, the Russian foreign minister and the FSB Putin regime, Europe will put boots on the ground, whatever the objections of Russia. And therefore, what you end up with is effectively the front line of NATO. It wouldn't be called NATO, but effectively the front line of NATO not only touches upon Russian borders, around the Baltics and with now with Finland, but also runs down throughout the front line, 800 miles front line, and one presumes further around with Belarus. That becomes effectively NATO, and it's European powers that would pay for that. It's European armies that would staff that. And in terms of the extra arms spending that America has been demanding, remember 2%, now 2.5%, 3%, 4%, 5% has been mentioned. The bulk of that, at least possibly, will come from Europe transferring money to American arms manufacturers. So Macron has talked about a European answer here. That would be slow, that would be difficult. On the other hand, Starmer showing lack of European unity. Starmer has talked about placating Trump. Either way, another argument or another related argument is this idea of the United States radically subordinating Europe to the United States in the sort of manner that Trotsky speculated about in the early 1920s, having looked at Europe being balkanized. He was talking about the United States really treating Europe effectively as a neo-colony. There wouldn't be loads of US troops in Europe, but Europe would be not independent. Europe would be dependent on the United States and would be expected to pay for that privilege in the same way as Ukraine is paying for that privilege in terms of the Trump plan when it comes to rare earths and metals. And again, just to finish on that, worthwhile quoting the statistic, and that is if you take reparations, which is meant, Ukraine's meant to be a friendly power that were imposed on Germany under the terms of the Versailles Agreement, Ukraine will be paying a higher percentage of its gross national product to the United States. And I think that gives you something of the flavor of what the United States has in store for Britain. And therefore, when I read the social imperialist press, lo and behold, no surprise that you have equivalent on the front page. The United States is selling out Ukraine. Europe must come up and supply the weapons to defend Ukraine. And then you'll have on the back page, no to cuts, no to austerity. In other words, the social imperialist press thinks you can have guns and butter. You can't. There is a choice, and it was inevitable. I have to say, it wasn't hard to predict that it wouldn't just be the foreign aid budget that went. No wonder Annalisa Dodds resigned. She had no money. She was head of a department that was there for talking the talk. It couldn't walk the walk. Half the budget, as I understand it, or something along those lines, was already allocated to hotel owners, asylum seekers internally in Britain. The rest of her budget was taken away. She walks. It was inevitable. We don't know yet what's going to be in the next budget. My guess for what it will be cuts in terms of welfare benefits. Whether they're going to go for PIP, whether they're going to go for old fogies like me, pensioners, are they going to go for the NHS? I don't know. More difficult. Either way, there will be welfare cuts, and money will go into arms spending, and a good chunk of that arms spending will make its way into US companies and improve their performance on Wall Street and all the rest of it. So anyway, that's just a comment there. I think just as a footnote to that, worthwhile commenting on Kursk. It looks like Russian troops will retake it. Whether they go any further into Ukraine, that depends if Ukraine's put in defensive positions. They've been very good at, spending money on defensive lines that ain't there. In other words, there's plenty of examples of corruption, one presumes, going from a very low level all the way to the top when it comes to, to dragon's teeth, when it comes to trenches, when it comes to putting in place barbed wire tank traps and all the rest of it. I wouldn't put this down to the US. I'm sure the US cutting off deliveries for a short time and spy information made some difference. But the reality is that Russia's been piling on the pressure. We've not only had, I don't know how effective they've been. You can read reports that they were brilliant or reports that they were useless, North Korean troops. But we also know that elite troops were diverted from the south, were thrown in to this battle. But I wouldn't be surprised, if the decision hadn't been made to scuttle. Either way, again, just as a footnote to a footnote, just sort of throw into it. I was reading a report in the Daily Telegraph. Make of it what you will. Russia's got a new drone. Nothing particularly exciting about that. But this drone, actually, I was going, what? It's actually connected by wire with the operator, which apparently, at least at the moment, makes it invulnerable. I think it's called a Rubicon, makes it invulnerable just for the moment to electronic jamming, and hence its extreme success on the battlefield. Now, how much longer that advantage lasts, how long it takes for technology to develop to jam it or whatever, I don't know. Either way, there's lots of film of Bradley fighting vehicles and other Ukrainian armored vehicles and lorries being blown up by these particular drones.